Hello folks. Now I'm sure you're wondering, what am I doing inside? Usually don't I start these videos outdoors, in the open, maybe near some attraction? Well, I would have loved to start the video off that way, but fate had another direction for me. In between the last trip, between upstate New York and this next trip, which I'll reveal when the first video comes out, I came down with a nasty cold, and I lost my voice. It sounded completely raspy, so I wanted to save you all the burden of having my voice sound horrible, and instead see how this type of video works out, where I'm speaking from an outside perspective. I already went through this little trip in between the tours. Now I have a little bit more perspective after going through that. Personally, I like showing myself at the location, so it's more of that human element. You can see my emotions as we go through these places. But if you like this concept of me giving my commentary after going to the location, maybe I might do a little bit more of these types of things. Anyway, for right now, this is just going to be a one-time thing as I see it right now. Let's take you all down to the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour. I just want to give some background for why this thing exists and why we're visiting this place. So, Pennsylvania has had lucky geography. It has been blessed with heaps of coal deposits deep under the ground. Lots of organic deposits from millions and millions of years ago. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the Appalachian Mountains. These are a huge chain of mountains going across the eastern portion of the United States. Pennsylvania is one of those states which has the Appalachian Mountains in it. A lot of these Appalachian states, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, are all known for the coal deposits that are in these Appalachian Mountains, or shall I say underground, under these mountains. And Pennsylvania is no exception. Pennsylvania, the state as a whole, is full of coal and oil from these mountains. And so, as populations moved into these cities and towns in Pennsylvania, they realized that they could make a profit from joining the coal mining industry. There is a region of Pennsylvania, the northeast part of Pennsylvania, which has its own coal deposit. And because of that, this metropolitan area known as the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area developed and boomed. If you look on a map and see northeastern Pennsylvania, you will see that there is this big crescent-like population metropolitan area. That whole area was built because of the coal industry. The whole thing sits atop a big stretch of coal deposits. So a lucky few made huge profits, but I also want to make this an important note that only a very, very few amount of people made the profit. Most of the people were working underground, deep in the coal mines, barely scraping by to feed their families. It was a very dangerous job to be a coal miner. The rewards weren't great, but what else was there to do to make money back in the day? Today, the coal mine still stands, but coal is no longer driven up to the surface as much. Eventually, deindustrialization occurred. You couldn't really mine coal as much to make a profit, and so the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area of northeastern Pennsylvania had to find other means to maintain its economy. But the coal mine still stands as this museum, this legacy of an important note in American history that this region served. So without further ado, let me tell you what I did in the middle of June. I always wanted to go to this place, but never really found the time. Last June, a month and a half ago or so, I called my buddy, the guy who was in the Old Forge video, and I said, hey, do you want to go down into this coal mine? And so we both made the journey to this coal mine, the Lackawanna coal mine. So when you get to this place, it's right outside of Scranton. It's actually right outside, or possibly inside, the park that we visited in the Old Forge video. And so when you get there, you can find all these amazing artifacts that were really used in the coal mining industry. Machines, tools, all displayed. You also saw things on display that weren't necessarily used in the coal mining, but had to rely on coal, such as maybe a steam locomotive that would use the coal as fuel. That was on display. as with all tourism places, there's gonna be an adjacent museum, a gift shop, some film exposition. But we weren't there for that. We were there to really experience the true mine. We wanted to get underground and see the tunnels and tracks and everything associated with the real mine underground. So eventually we bought our tickets. They weren't expensive. I mean, for something like going down underground to experience something like this, it was a reasonable $15 to $20 price. So we were in for it, and the first thing that we really got to experience on this tour was essentially we would go onto this little small train down into the mine, just like the miners would go down back in the day. As we went more and more underground, we saw it was getting darker, less light was coming through, it was getting a lot more damp. I could feel a few raindrops or something coming down in the train area. I've gotta say, it was a bit nerve-wracking. We were going down underground, past the safety, and relying on all these cables to make sure our descent was safe and not fatal. But with all that, it was just so surreal. We were actually seeing what the coal miners of 100, 150 years ago would have to experience every morning as they went down, every evening as they went back up. We were really getting a live look at history. So as we descended, as we finally reached the ground, we got to meet our tour guide. And believe me, he was this amazing guide. He was not only knowledgeable, he grew up in this area, he had family who were coal miners back in the day. He was also really funny and relatable and down to earth, so he really made the tour experience all that better. Let me tell you all, it was dark. The only lights we had were these dim lights on the top being held up very loosely. Let me tell you about the structure. I mean, the only things supporting the mine from not collapsing were these wooden posts that were already starting to wither away and look damaged. So overall, I don't think it would be safe by today's standards. Something that I learned was that deep underground, oxygen isn't all that common. The only reason we were breathing safely a lot of oxygen was because they had these constant airflows of oxygen coming through, pumped from the surface down underground, and they shut those pumps off at the end of every day. So if one were to come down to the mine at night, there would be no oxygen. They would die from asphyxiation. And sometimes they've told of many stories where there were people who decided to come in at night, and by the morning they were on the ground. So only go to this mine during the daytime under the supervision of the tour guides, because it's not so safe. So the way the mine was dug out and developed essentially as the coal mining industry dug out more and more coal was that it was this grid-like pattern. There were these parallel corridors and tunnels, but there were also perpendicular lanes so that they would, be most efficient and orderly. I mean, it's a business, right? So they would have to make sure that everything was in order and that there were as few mishaps as possible. So they made sure the coal mine was essentially like a grid-like map. But the striations of coal that solidified there and became the anthracite that these miners were mining weren't just flat. They went up and down, diagonally, wherever the striations were, however the mountains developed. And so these miners, they don't want to mine more and more and more to possibly have a collapse in the mine. No, they want to only dig as much coal and anthracite, possibly even stone if they have to, as they want. So what you have are these very small tunnels. I think they were called belly tunnels because you really only could travel through these tunnels by crawling on your belly. So as we traversed these tunnels underground, we then got to see all these displays, some of which were these big, heavy machinery. As time went on, technological innovation developed, and so you had better ways to dig the coal out. Instead of digging by shovels and all that monotonous, hard labor stuff, you could just use a nice electric-powered machine to scrape all the coal out. There was also this big telephone contraption from back in the day that I guess the miners or the miner foreman would use to contact either people from different parts of the mine. The mine was huge, so you had to have that communication, or to contact people from the surface. It was very interesting, much more than just plain old tunnels. They had tunnels for different purposes, main tunnels for digging out the coal, or transport tunnels, where they would have carts and carts and carts full of this coal that would be delivered, surprisingly, by mule. They would have these mules underground to transport carts of coal, and they would have some tunnels used for the transportation. They actually had like these life-size sculptures underground of like people younger than me working in the mines. They had like displays of little children sitting down right by where all the adult miners would work. It was honestly kind of creepy. Sometimes they would have little sculptures of people being trapped and submerged under the coal that collapsed on top of them. It was a little bit daunting, to say the least, because maybe 150 years ago, if I was alive, maybe that would be the type of work I'd have no choice but to do. To work these long hours in the coal mines, to really risk death every step of the way for such a meager pay. One thing our tour guide really made sure to do was be sure to tell us all the ways a coal miner could die, or perish, or get hurt, all the dangers of the coal mining job. I would definitely recommend a tour if you like a bit of a scare. As fun as a tour like this would be, it's also very eye-opening and educating to really know that this was real life for people like you or I. We're very lucky to be living at this point right now where coal mining is not really a big industry anymore in America, and that lots of laws and regulations have been passed to protect ordinary blue-collar workers. But this was United States history for a long period of time, throughout the 1800s into the early 1900s. It wouldn't be uncommon to know people who worked in the coal mines. Like every day, these people would be shoveling coal for the foreman, the people in charge of the mines, and the big people at the top of the pecking order who got insanely rich from all the work they didn't have to do. Manual labor jobs like these were not fun at all, but that's really how America got going in the beginning. You didn't have all these service jobs where people could really get a college education, get a nice job with safe conditions. A lot of the time, coal mining was your only job if you happened to live in coal country. Overall, the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour was an amazing experience. I'm very thankful to have gone through that and really toured the area. Because through real-life experiences, through real-life tours like that, it's through these adventures in the American heartland that you really get to see what true American culture is like. You can't go to a coal mine tour in New York City, or Los Angeles, or Chicago. You really have to go more inland to witness for yourself true American culture. Unless you go to states maybe like West Virginia, coal mines are starting to become a rarity. So I would recommend these coal mine tours across the country. It was insanely fun to go underground and then right back out, as we did at the very end, the same way we went down on that little yellow train. It was so cool. I would recommend it to anybody who really wants to learn and educate themselves about what true American culture is like. So there you have it, the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour, right outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania. I should honestly go to Scranton, PA sometime soon. Maybe someday, I don't know. But there you have it. That's the adventure we went on in between these giant tours. Looks like you'll be getting to see the next adventure real soon, but this was sort of a thing in between. One to occupy myself with the time I had in between trips, and then also to do something a little interesting, a little offbeat. So I hope you like this video. The different format is kind of weird for me, just speaking in front of a camera, but, well, I do that on my trips, but I don't really like sitting down. I like walking around, really immersing myself in the adventure in real time. Who knows, maybe this could become more of a thing later on down the road. Who knows? But anyway, with that being said, here, away from where I was talking about, I wish I could have concluded the video at the place, but away from the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour, more travels to come. I will see you at the next location, and hopefully in person.